You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show. So, the DevOps career. It is a big question these days about DevOps overall, but there are so many opportunities to be in the DevOps world. And today we're here with someone who is really helping educate so many people about DevOps. I'm here with Nana, who has the show TechWorld with Nana. Hi, Nana. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me on the show. And excited to talk about my favorite topic for sure, which is DevOps.
It's clear it's your favorite topic when I look at your website. You offer a DevOps bootcamp. You offer premium courses. You offer even DevOps for business. You offer a roadmap. And you have courses coming up, looks like around DevSecOps. Yep. How did you get started in this world?
So I got started in IT as a software developer, actually. So that's my first background. When I started, I didn't have any idea of like other DevOps, other IT professions, so to say. So I just started with the most obvious ones, which was software development. And then within software development, I tried to find like what I liked the most, which was not the front-end development. So I kept moving towards the backend and then to like the configuration and then to Jenkins. And at that time, I also tried to find projects to work in where I had the possibility to try multiple things and not just one type of task, like just front-end development or just backend development. And I always chose the projects proactively that had lots of technologies. And one of the projects where we had Docker and Jenkins and Android applications, so all this stuff, so I could actually try multiple things because I was like really curious about those stuff. And by trying these different types of tasks, basically, I just discovered that I was more prone to tasks that I didn't know back then that was part of the DevOps. So it was like, setting up the release pipelines that nobody else wanted to do in the team. Configuring and making sure to like tweak the build times of our front-end packages. So basically just tweaking this kind of configuration stuff. And then later, it was another project where just by chance got to work with Kubernetes. And it was, again, something that right away I knew that I like to do, which everybody else was like, sure, you can have it. We don't want Kubernetes and anything to do with that. And that's kind of was my segue into the DevOps later.
That's great. And so you really enjoy sharing that knowledge. That's how it seems like you move from that early part of your career into what you do now.
Yeah, there was another discovery because so basically when I learned Kubernetes, or I actually had to take over Kubernetes in one of the projects in a pretty large company in Austria where I was freelancing. And there were a lot of other people in the team who needed the knowledge because I was kind of the only one who had the Kubernetes knowledge. And obviously we needed to share that in the team. And then people from other departments who also wanted to implement Kubernetes in their projects would come over and they were like, yeah, how does this thing work? Like, can you explain it to us? Is it like really as complex as people tell it? Like we're kind of thinking about it. So I started like transferring my knowledge internally in the company and try to explain to these people, kind of demystify the mystery around Kubernetes. And that was like my first time understanding, okay, like how do I make this, how do I explain this stuff simply to kind of take that fear away from the people, like, oh my God, this is like something crazy. So I was trying to explain the concepts that I was learning about Kubernetes. It was when I was working with Kubernetes, it was actually pretty difficult because there was just super it was just almost no information on internet about
Right.
anything that I was doing. It was like literally just trial and error on
Right.
every single thing that I was trying to achieve on Kubernetes cluster. So I was just trying to transfer that knowledge in the team. And then I was like, okay, I guess there are lots of other engineers in the world that need this
Yeah.
knowledge that I painfully had to acquire. So that's how I started making the videos.
So Nana, you're talking to all these people, you're providing these courses. What do you think of DevOps now? And how do you even define a culture? And how do you think about the ways that people should be thinking about getting into DevOps? What is that career path that you're seeing? And why is now such a good time to get into DevOps?
Yeah, so DevOps, I think, is an interesting space compared to other more like less recent IT professions or roles, because it is still emerging. Like there are a lot of things that are not standardized yet in the industry, and also I see in the comments, like from the people and the feedback to our videos, that a lot of people are confused, and there is a lot of confusion about around DevOps. And the biggest confusion is around the basically where's the clear line between those roles, right? So you have the software engineer, you have DevOps engineer. Some people argue there is no DevOps engineer, so it's just the concept overlaying the whole engineering team. Then you have cloud engineers and operations engineers. So basically you have all these roles, and then SRE engineer, for example, and people have a hard time defining the clear line between those roles. So that's one thing, and it's not just the engineers who have problem defining it, but also the companies themselves who want to obviously implement DevOps in their companies. And also, I can understand totally that as an engineer, you basically move from one company to another in the same role, and then suddenly you're doing something completely different, or the company expects your DevOps to be something different than what you're used to in your previous job, for example. So that creates a lot of confusion. And the second part that is contributing a little bit to that chaos is that there's just so much going on in that space. It's evolving constantly. You have new concepts popping up. You have new, like, tons of tools around Kubernetes. They're just hundreds of tools in the Kubernetes ecosystem alone. There are logging and monitoring tools that are, or even CD tools that are just made for Kubernetes. And because of that, I can understand why some people are overwhelmed, especially the ones that are new to DevOps, or they're kind of starting into DevOps, or kind of looking from the side and trying to get in, because it just seems super overwhelming, right? My perspective is that, sure, like, it is a little bit chaotic and non-standardized, but I also like it because that also means that there's a lot of creativity in that time frame, right? So lots of new tools, and every time a new concept pops up, my reaction is, okay, like, what's happening now? So we are developing in towards a new trend, like it was with the platform engineering, for example. So for me, it's always like an opportunity to find, okay, like, something exciting is happening again in that field. So let me see where this is going. And I personally think that in the next couple of years, I think it's great that we have so much creativity and things going on in the DevOps space, but things will probably start to standardize a little bit. So we're going to have standard tools, and not like 100 tools for the same job, but like one standard, at least for the industry. And then we're going to have more standardization around the job descriptions, maybe a little bit more scoping of what is the responsibility exactly of DevOps engineer. And right now it may be like too much, which again, some people may not mind because they want to do a lot, but some people want like specific, what are my requirements with this role so that I know what I'm doing, right? And that is kind of missing still in the DevOps space.
I love that you say DevOps is likable. I like that. I mean, I love the people in the community. They're likable people. It seems like there's a real culture there of camaraderie and helpfulness and community, so to speak. And I'm just curious on how you are taking these concepts and applying them to the tools. What are some of the methods that you've helped people really develop? Because if you're not the kind of person who just likes to try everything, you may just be very focused on like, what are the tools and what's the perfect tool, right? There's a lot of people who have just different frameworks. So how do you help people get past that?
Yeah, that is another interesting thing that I kind of analyzed in retrospect. In the way how I was approaching the knowledge that in the knowledge sharing, and I also do that in my courses constantly. And once I actually realize that I'm doing it, I also mention it in the courses so that people understand the importance of it. So the way I see it is that the distinction between learning the concepts and learning the tools. And these are two extremely different things. And when you're, and this is when you're working actually as an engineer, for example, you get pushed into the DevOps role, or you kind of have to work with these tools. What happens very often is you start working with a specific tool that your team selects, or that is kind of the most popular one, or is already being used, and you start learning the concept with the tool, right? So you never kind of zoom out and be like, why are we doing this? Like, what is the whole concept behind this? We're just using Docker, right? And you kind of dive into the Docker features right away, and you kind of miss the concepts behind that, right? So you know, like in your project, that's what you want to achieve with this tool. So how do we achieve that with the features that the tool provides? Same with Kubernetes, and that's how I learned Kubernetes and Helm and everything in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And when you do that, the main focus is, how do I get this tool to work, right? That's the main focus to kind of get the thing done, because you have a deadline and you have the things to do, and you never take time to actually understand the concepts. So the way I started approaching it when I started making those YouTube videos, I actually went a little bit deeper, and I was like, okay, this is how you get it to work, but what are the best practices, or what are the concepts behind? Why are we doing this way? There are alternatives. Why do we have alternatives? Because each option is good for different use cases, right? So I kind of try to approach the teaching or explaining these technologies this way. And now I always structure my videos in this way. So I start with the general problem statement, like, what problem did we have in the industry? Like I did with the.
So is that a concept then? So you start with a problem, or is the concept more about before that and like understanding how to approach the problem?
Yeah, that kind of included in the problem, right? So for example, when I created the platform engineering video, which turned out to be 45 minutes, I took so much time to explain the problem, because it was like the traditional to DevOps, and then the DevOps to what problems it actually led to, and then okay, now what is going to be solution? And then I talk about, okay, if we had a solution to this problem, that's how it would look like, and that's exactly what this concept or tool implements. And then I go into like how this tool actually solves that problem, right? So the why and how are like really two different things, and I personally think it's easier for you to keep up with these like hundreds of tools being developed, because when you learn for example, if you learn the concept of release pipelines, you can use Jenkins, you can use GitLab CI/CD, you can go to the newest types of CD tools that are completely different from Jenkins, for example, right? That use the pull model instead of push model. But because you know the underlying concepts, it's just easier for you to stick on top of that and learn, okay, the push-pull model, why is there a difference? We're moving towards the Kubernetes ecosystem. So it makes sense to have different kinds of CD pipelines there. So it just makes the learning and keeping up with the new trends and new technologies just way easier.
So when you're thinking about the key concepts, there are several I expect that you need to know about. CI/CD is a critical aspect of DevOps. There's infrastructure as code, matters. There's even emerging topics like DevSecOps. How do you think about the concepts and, their order or their prioritization or just generally on ways to, learn more?
Yeah, so in DevOps, and this is how I structure the entire bootcamp and the curriculum. The basically when you look at the technologies around DevOps, the backbone, like really the core, is the release pipeline. Because when you kind of reverse engineer to what DevOps is, which is you have the application changes and you want to get them to the end user without any bottlenecks, as fast as possible, as streamlined as possible, as secure as possible, without having any bottlenecks and slow down process steps in between, right? So that reverse engineer that gives you that automated pipeline, right? So that is kind of the backbone of DevOps, which is the CI/CD pipeline, all the way towards the production environment, completely automated, which is kind of an ideal state that a lot of companies cannot realistically achieve, but at least that that's the goal, right? And then you kind of build on top of that, right? So if you have the release pipeline, what other integrations to other tools do you need, right? You need the Docker registry. You need integration to end environment, right? How does the end environment look like? And then you have this, in DevOps, you have this continuous cycle, right? Because you deploy the application changes, but then you get the bugs get discovered, you want new features, so it kind of starts from the beginning, right? So you have this constant flow, but it all goes through that same release pipeline, right? And the same with DevSecOps, right? In the course, and this is the course where I probably mention this the most, where you have so many tools for different types of security scans, right? You have the SAST scanning, you have the DAST scanning, you have secret scanning, and you can choose like from tens and hundreds of tools. And I always try to teach the concept first. So what is a SAST? Why are we doing it, right? And then I try to I make sure to teach the students that the tools just come and go, and there could be a new tool tomorrow that does the same thing, and it is become the industry standard. So if you understand the concept, you can just replace the tool in half an hour, right? And then once you understand the concept of SAST, okay, we're scanning our own application, but what about other people's application code that we are including in our application code, right? The third-party libraries. That's a concept. It doesn't matter which tool you use to scan third-party libraries, right? You want to do that. So you can replace or exchange the tools very easily when you understand everything on a conceptual level.
So let's take one concept in particular, infrastructure as code, which has gained a lot of popularity. Why is it a key concept now? Why is it emerging? Why are you putting attention to it? And how do you define what concepts to put attention to as the culture develops over time? Because as you say, DevOps is emerging.
Yeah, so I think infrastructure as code is like the next natural development after you implement DevOps properly. And this is again ties to understanding why was there a need for a concept of infrastructure as code. And when you understand how DevOps implementation looks like as a result, then you understand immediately that there is like a natural need for infrastructure as code. So for example, with DevOps, we're saying that we're automating the entire process, including all the infrastructure where the application is running, right? And then we have this concept of the concept of containerized applications, microservices, and then scaling them up in Kubernetes cluster, where Kubernetes basically just came and said you could scale your microservices applications with hundreds of replicas, and with the underlying infrastructure also can be scaled super easily, right? Just add a new worker node or remove it if you want to scale up and down. And then what that basically caused us is now you have an infrastructure that, compared to the traditional infrastructure, you have maybe hundreds or thousands of physical, like virtual machines. And then you have just thousands of applications or containerized application replicas just running inside the cluster, right? And it just unrealistic that you're going to manage that manually, right? And that's basically where the infrastructure as code comes in, because essentially, and back to the stateless nature of Kubernetes and containers, you don't want any dependency on your underlying infrastructure. So any server, any worker node that you can choose or select in your Kubernetes underlying infrastructure, you should be able to take that and just throw it away and add a new one and just replace it, right? And that is, again, a concept of kettle versus pets. So you don't have like this nurtured and nourished servers. You just have servers that you can replace anytime you want, right? And ideally, you want to take your entire infrastructure that may be thousands of servers, and if it just crashes in one geographic region, or whatever happens, you can just completely demolish that and recover in another region or in the same region with exactly the same state, right?
I see.
And it just naturally asks for infrastructure as code because you can't do that manually.
So what are some of the ways that people can get into DevOps, in terms of, does it make sense to interact with the community? That has always seemed like something that really makes sense to me. What are the things you can do on your own? What are some of the courses you'd recommend that you offer? What are some of the other ways that you think of when you think of like people just getting into DevOps as a career?
Yeah, I think it depends on like how you learn the best, because there are some people, like you mentioned, that really like that, really get the most from community, like talking to people, getting their experiences. I personally like just, again, like learning about the concepts and then going straight into hands-on, like just trying stuff out myself. But I also like to have like a structure where someone like can actually guide me through, like, okay, this is how it's done, and actually guide me through a hands-on project. Because I know from experience, when you work with these tools, when you work with, especially in DevOps, the specific of DevOps compared to software development, for example, is that you have to combine a lot of tools together. And that combination part is often where, it gets the most complex, right? So you can use one tool independently, like CI/CD, tool, but you have to integrate it with lots of other stuff. And then, you need resources for all those integration points. And that was actually one of the main reasons why I created the DevOps Bootcamp. So I didn't want to just create another AWS course or just another whatever Docker course, right? I really tried to understand what are the things that people are missing in terms of learning resources. And that was the most complex part, was how do I take 10 technologies and just integrate them together, right? Like, how do I build that whole ecosystem with those tools? And again, you can learn those tools separately, but then you kind of left alone to kind of try out different tools and read the documentation and forums for integration parts. So that's how the DevOps Bootcamp is designed. If you just want to get started and like maybe test whether this is for you and kind of whether you enjoy it, either if you are in a project, then use the opportunity to actually take on the DevOps task, because that will be the easiest thing, I think, to do. Instead of just learning something, you have actual practical use case. Or if you're, if you don't have a job where you can try that out, I would recommend just, find an open source project that you can, maybe containerize and deploy to Kubernetes. I also have resources on that on YouTube, so you can do that completely for free. And then just in that process of taking that application, containerizing and deploying it to any Kubernetes environment, could be even a local one, you learn so much, so many details and so many just insights into those tools and integrations. You kind of get the first taste of it. And then you can basically decide whether it is actually for you, whether you want to take the path of DevOps, whether it's absolutely not for you and you don't want to deal with it. But yeah, hands-on, that is probably the most important.
So just in conclusion, I'd love to hear more about where you're going with your courses and such. And I'd love your take on platform engineering.
Yeah, so with our courses, we actually decided that we don't want to do like these individual technology courses anymore. We want to do like this full you're going to learn a profession, right? So that's the DevOps bootcamp, that's the DevSecOps bootcamp. We want to do the cloud engineering bootcamp as well, because I just think that is the juice of it, right? Because you really learn like this whole ecosystem in one structured way. So that's definitely the path that we're gonna go to. It is way more challenging for us to do those. It is way more time consuming, but I just think it's the best. And in terms of platform engineering, that's an interesting topic as well, because I think I would wait a couple of, maybe a year or two, to see really where the industry is going to take platform engineering, because it is a relatively new concept. And I would be really curious to see how the companies are going to be able to implement that, because it is a great concept when you think about it theoretically, but there are a lot of ways that you can misimplement it and kind of take a step backwards instead of like actually going into the right direction. And there's just a lot of confusion again around platform engineering, and a lot of people that are, they were kind of upset. They were like, why do we need platform engineering now? We already have DevOps. And then what is the difference between them? And that's why I made like in my research, when I was working on the platform engineering video, the most important thing for me was to understand how are different companies trying to implement platform engineering with their existing, resources and teams. Because theory is one thing, but the actual implementation, like in practice, it may look completely different. So there are lots of concepts and things around platform engineering, and it's the whole entire topic basically. So I'm really curious to see where this is gonna go. But as I said in my YouTube video, basically I went into details of what were some of the things that DevOps kind of left room for optimization that naturally required a concept like platform engineering, right? And the core of this is basically for every technology or platform like Kubernetes, AWS, CI/CD tools, you have this distinction between you have to administer this tool, and then once you have administered it, and then the engineers will come and use it, right? So that's the division basically between those. So you have the administration side of the tool, and that is like the platform team, and you have the usage part, right? So you have set up the access management to the cluster or CI/CD tool, whatever, and now the engineering teams can use it, right? And that's the other part, and that's where the whole thing splits basically. And my final analysis was that now you need DevOps engineer in both of these teams, right? Because you have DevOps processes here while you're building the internal developer platform, but you still need DevOps processes in the application development process, because you still need to write the pipeline code and Kubernetes manifests. So there was another super interesting topic.
It almost becomes like the what's the Russian doll called? You need DevOps and DevOps and DevOps and DevOps.
Yeah, the Matryoshka dolls. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nana. I really enjoyed talking with you. I hope we get the chance to talk again. It would almost be fun sometime to interview people who are getting into DevOps and get your perspectives, and through discussing with them. We'll have to think about that for another episode. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. TechWorld with Nana. You should check out her site. She's got great courses. She does great work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for an interesting discussion.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.